Time to witness the birth of Jason Voorhees.
Sandra.
Oh, god damn it, I put into town to dread sundown.
I don't want to scare anyone, but I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason.
Did you know that a young boy drowned?
Legend has it that Jason saw his mother beheaded that night, and he took his revenge. A revenge that he'll continue to seek if anyone ever enters his wilderness again.
Welcome back, guys, to my Friday the 13th series review. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite sequels, Friday the 13th Part 2. Now, Friday the 13th Part 2 is such an interesting sequel for me because what it should be is subpar, standard, and generic. I mean, it follows the formula of the original movie, which wasn't very original to begin with. They weren't able to bring Tom Savini back, and it has such a weird, odd, and frankly stupid plot direction when you really think about it in making Jason the killer. Because the whole point of the first movie was that Jason had died in that drowning, and that's why Mrs. Voorhees went crazy and started to kill everybody. Well, now he's not dead, and he's the killer of the movie, because we need a goddamn sequel for this movie. In fact, many people from the first movie didn't even want to participate for this sequel because of how stupid that plot direction was. Yes, the people who made Friday the 13th felt they were too above this story direction to participate. Think about that. So, with those kinds of odds stacked against it, what chance did this sequel have? Well, it took the very interesting approach of doing what the first movie did, but better. As I said, the original Friday the 13th is a decent movie. It's an enjoyable movie, but it left a lot of room for improvement. The characters, the structure, and the overall writing were more or less overlooked in favor of the body count. And while Friday the 13th Part 2 definitely has its eyes on the prize in terms of body count, it doesn't seem to sacrifice quality, at least not to the degree that the original did. The first major improvement, as far as I'm concerned, are the characters. Now, I did find the characters of the original to be entertaining. I did enjoy them, and the performances, but here not only do I find these characters entertaining, I'm actively interested in them. Particularly the relationship between Vicky and Mark, I thought that was very sweet. I thought that was pretty engaging, and when they met their end, I was surprisingly sad about that. It pulled a reaction out of me that I didn't really get from the first movie. And not only that, I do find the characters just all around more likable and more well acted. I mean, Paul and Ted are easily in like my top 10, if not 5, best characters in this franchise for me. But you can't talk about characters in this movie without talking about Amy Steele as Ginny. Now, whenever you hear people argue about who the best final girl is, Ginny's almost always in that debate, because she's such an endearing character. She's charming and likable while still maintaining an authenticity. She's not perfect, and she's certainly not virginal, contrary to many of the final girl tropes going around at that time. But the main reason I think she's such an effective final girl is just because of how smart she is, how intelligent she is. I mean, she's actually able to play off the psychology of our villain here. That's the kind of confrontation you didn't see almost at all in these types of slasher movies. Even the Halloween movies, when they came down to it, still had very physical-based confrontations. Yes, you do have the obligatory chasing where Ginny's running around and dead bodies are flying around conveniently wherever she goes. But where that leads to is a very unique, very suspenseful, and character-defining psychological interplay between Ginny and Jason. In that sense, I also see the climax for this movie as being a major step up from the original. And I even find the final scare of this movie to be more effective than the original final scare, as iconic as that was. Because it doesn't force you to suspend your disbelief as much, and it's just a more satisfying payoff to the story to finally see exactly what Jason looks like under that sack head. And while we're on the subject of the big guy, let's talk about Jason Voorhees. While the original movie laid the foundation for Jason's mythology, this is the movie that really started building that whole lore, that whole mythos. Obviously, there's no hockey mask here, which might disappoint some fans. I do prefer the hockey mask look overall. I'm definitely glad they went in that direction. But I don't think this is a bad look for Jason. I think it's got a creepy enough vibe to it. And it's not like I can hold it against this movie that they didn't incorporate this feature element from the later movies. Now, what I find the most interesting about this Jason is that he's definitely by far the most human, the most vulnerable, and the most sympathetic of the Jasons we get in these early movies. I mean, that's why you're able to have that climax, because he does have an Achilles heel, a psychological Achilles heel that Ginny's able to exploit. And for a lot of those reasons, a lot of people feel like this Jason isn't as imposing as the later Jasons are. I mean, I can't say he's as intimidating as Ted White, obviously. But I do think this Jason is a bit more interesting than those later Jasons. He definitely has the most layers and the most characterization to him. And let me say, I do find it interesting that people consider the character a Michael Myers ripoff for obvious reasons, but in this movie, he reminded me the most of the original Leatherface. I mean, he has that backwoods hillbilly vibe to him. They imply that he has some sort of mental disability, and ultimately, he's doing these killings because of the influence of one of his family members. Now that speaks to the original Leatherface, the Gunnar Hansen Leatherface, to a T. And aside from all those things I just mentioned, I just think the direction here by Steve Miner was a lot tighter than the original. I think it's able to convey a lot more tone and a lot more atmosphere on a more consistent level than that original movie did. And I love the set design of Jason's shack at the end. I mean, the head sitting there with all the sweaters around it, I mean, that's gold, man. That is awesome. Now, as much as I love the sequel, there are some pretty glaring issues. Now, I'm not even going to get into the whole thing about what happened to Jason, if he drowned or not, where he's been this whole time, why he never reached out to his mother, because that's just a lazy, sloppy piece of writing that the filmmakers either didn't know how to get around or didn't care enough to try and know how to get around. So it's unfortunate that this movie, as well written as I think the majority of it is definitely bogged down by that just lazy piece of writing that you can't escape, but you just go with it. I do think the opening of this movie is a little slow. I do like the tension that they build up with Jason trying to close in on Alice, and I do think the ultimate payoff to that scene is satisfying enough, but do we really need to spend like 5 minutes recapping the first movie? I mean, the first movie was just like a year before this one, and it was Friday the 13th. It was not Memento. We didn't need a bullet point presentation on it. Now, this is something they do in the last movie, and I should have brought it up in that review, but what's with the dual ending thing they keep doing? Like, what effect are they going for? I honestly don't get it. So, like, was this whole thing a dream? Was one of the best moments of this entire franchise a dream? And where the hell is Paul? I mean, what the hell is your problem, Friday the 13th Part 2? I want answers, goddammit! Now, in my first review, I started off by saying I did not think the strength of this franchise lay in the kills. And you might think that's ridiculous of me to say, but I think I can prove that here, because the kills in one of my favorite Friday movies, kind of weak. I mean, they're not like the worst I've ever seen, obviously, but it's also obvious that they didn't get Tom Savini back. There are some good kills. I mean, what happens to Mark? That's brutal. And there would have been some more good kills had the MPAA not taken their butcher knives to this movie, but whatever. But overall, I mean, they're just a lot more subpar than you would expect out of this franchise. But again, I don't watch Friday the 13th Part 2 because of the kills. I watch it for Jason, I watch it for the atmosphere, for the tension, the suspense, the mythos, and I even watch this movie for the characters. There you go, critics, me watching a Friday the 13th movie for the characters. In the end, I do contend this to be one of the best Friday the 13th movies. I love this movie, I love what it did, I love the direction it took this franchise. I do consider it to be a huge improvement over the first film. I think Steve Miner brought a lot more to the atmosphere, to the characters than Sean Ness Cunningham did. And overall, I do think the filmmakers really found their footing with this movie, and it reminds me of why I keep coming back to this franchise. So guys, those are my thoughts on Friday the 13th Part 2. What did you think of the sequel? Is it up there at the top for you, somewhere in the middle, somewhere at the bottom? Let me know in the comments. And stay tuned for next week, because we're going to be talking about Friday the 13th Part 3. 3D. Yay.
Jason, you can't fight him. You can't stop him. And now, you can't even keep him on the screen. Friday the 13th, Part 3 in 3D.